What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Golang Ecommerce backend project series. In this video, we are going to get items from the cart. We're going to go and get some items from the cart. All right. Now, a lot of people have this confusion, have this doubt that, hey, carts are supposed to be in the front end. I mean, I have React, Vue, Angular. Why don't I keep the cart in the front end? And obviously, you do have a cart in the front end, but when your project starts scaling up, when you have to think about hundreds and thousands of users, which almost nobody teaching you on YouTube thinks of, you want to have after you have to think about thousands of users, you have to think about having a cart in the backend. The reason for that is that, I mean, there are hundreds of reasons for it, but let me tell you the most common reason for it is that you want to be able to know which user has what items in the cart and why didn't they check it out. Because that's how it's called as abandoned cart recovery. That's how you market to them. That's how you make money. I mean, not all users go and buy everything that they have, right? So you want to push them special offers saying that, hey, you had this in your cart, you haven't bought it yet, or is there a reason why you haven't bought it yet, or can we do something for that? So that's a huge part of e-commerce sales. All right. So you want to always have a backend cart. You can't do without it if you're building a production level application. Anyhow, so this function does a lot of calculations. I won't say a lot of calculations, but it has to obviously find the total value of all the items in the cart. Now, there are ways to do it. Okay, so you can do it at the client side, which many people do, calculations on the client side. Let's say at the React or Angular side. Many people do it at the server side. Many people do calculations in Golang, on the Golang server or the Node.js server. But I like doing all the calculations in my MongoDB, because MongoDB is built as in it can perform these operations really fast. And the best way to do it is the aggregate function that MongoDB provides you. It's extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful. I mean, I can't tell you. I have done comparisons, and there are reports and articles full of these comparisons that if you make your server run and make those queries on the server side or the calculation on the server side, as opposed to you fetch that data from MongoDB with those queries, with aggregation queries. Aggregation queries are maybe 3 times as fast, and it's crazy, but those are the real numbers. If you want, I'll try and find some articles, but you can just Google it, just search the power of aggregation queries. It's insane. So if you really want to think about production level applications, if you want to think about going to thousands of users, and if you want to start thinking like somebody who's a senior engineer or a very senior engineer, an architect or a CTO, you want to think about these kind of things, right? So I mean, in my very basic projects, I don't think about it. This is like a basic to intermediate project. That's why I'm even telling you about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have wasted your time, right? And in the advanced projects, we have even more considerations, right? So this is like a basic to intermediate. So I wanted to tell you that you want to have a provision for something like that. Now, that means that we'll have to run an aggregation query. The aggregation query will have a match function. Now, there are multiple stages in aggregation, okay? Multiple stages. In case you don't know what aggregation is, there are multiple stages. You run that in MongoDB. The first stage that we'll have is match stage, then we'll have the unwind stage, and then we'll have the group stage. If you don't know what these are, feel free to read them up on MongoDB documents. MongoDB has an official documentation of aggregation. Just type on Google aggregation with MongoDB and you'll find the official documentation. It's simple, super simple to understand, very easy to understand. I use it all the time. And so I'm going to be using 3 stages, okay, to run this aggregation function. And the 3 stages, I want to run them because I want to first take that user and match the user's ID and then find the cart for that user, because the cart does not exist in isolation. It belongs to a particular user. So I want to find the cart of that user. And then I want to ungroup it. So I'll have like a match stage to match the user to get the cart information. Then I'll have an unwind stage to be able to access the individual values in his cart. And then I want to have a group stage that will help me add or find the total of the values of all the items in his cart. So I'll use an aggregation stage. I'll get all of this information. Now, enough talk. Maybe you're not understanding much with me talking here. So if I show you, you will understand much better. Okay. So as you know, this function returns a handler func. How do you do that? You say return func. This function takes in gen.context. Why do you have to take gin.context. Why does it take gin.context, and why is gin.context important? Because whenever you run any, whenever you send a request to an API, that request is easily accessible with the help of gin.context. Why and how is basically, you can see that I can say C, which is the gin context, and I can say C.query, which will give me access to the query that the user must have sent as a request to this API. And I will capture that in the user ID. Now, this is exactly what we did in our previous video. We did this. If you can see, we exactly did this. But I'm going to retype it again. The first few lines are going to be same, but I'll just retype it again because I'm expecting very beginner developers also to be here. So I'm going to retype it. Now, here what's happening is that user ID, let's say the user forgot to send any user ID. So we want to tell the user that, hey, there's some issue here, right? It's not correct what you're sending me. So right now what we're doing is we're creating a nice response to the user, right? Just like you draft a nice email to send to your boss or to send to a customer, this is how we draft a response. We have to say that there's a header, it's of type JSON because you want to send JSON. Then you want to write the actual JSON, right? You want to say http.status not found, and you want to say gin.h. You want to run the error, invalid ID. All right, then you want to abort. Okay, then you want to return from this function. La 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 la. Okay. Perfect. And now, just like we did here, out here, we want to get the user ID. And because we've already used the variable user ID, so what we did here was we just added a small t out here. This small t out here just to differentiate from a user ID, but also for us to not forget that it stores user ID, right? So you'll just put t out here. This is a very common practice. You'll see this all the time. Just slightly changing the name of the variable so that you don't forget the context of the variable. This is what it stores, and also you don't have a clash because you can't have variables doing multiple things, right? So you have to have a different variable here. So you'll take user ID, you'll get object ID from hex, you'll sort in user TID. And now when you want to work with a database, you want to have the context as the first thing. So you'll define the context and you'll say context dot with timeout, context dot background, comma 100 time dot second. So what you never want to do is you never want to just call a database function without having any timeout. You want to have timeouts because databases can take a very long time. Databases can be down. They can have some problems. They can crash, right? You don't want to keep, you don't want your server to always keep waiting for the database response. So you always want to have a timeout. All right. And now, now you want to obviously find the cart data for a user. So that means you'll need a variable called the filled cart. Why? Because this function gets items from the cart. So you need a variable called filled cart to be able to do that. So you'll say filled cart models dot user. Okay. And now what you'll do is you'll find that user's data. So firstly, you'll have to find the user. So you'll say user collection dot find one. You'll pass the context. You'll pass bson dot d. You'll say primitive dot e, and the key is id, comma the value here is this user t underscore id. This one out here. Right, this is the value that you'll pass out here. And here you want to say, you want to decode this. You want to say decode as filled cart. Okay. Filled cart. where have we heard about filled cart before? It's not here, right? It's not here as filled cart. So that means not a struct. What is it? Filled cart is this, guys. Filled cart is this out here. And by mistake, I've written user ID. It's just user, models.user. So filled cart is a variable of type models.user. This is the user. Okay. And as you can see, obviously we're finding the user. That's it. We're just finding the user for now. And what we'll say is we'll capture that in error. And here you'll say if error is not equal to nil. That means if error is not equal to nil, it means that there is an error. Okay. So we'll say log.print ln. The error, you'll print out the error, and you'll send an indented JSON. You'll say 500 comma not found, and then you just return. Okay, now comes the most important part, guys. You'll have to create a variable called filter match. As you know, we'll be running an aggregate query somewhere and sometime now, and I had told you in the beginning of the video that we'll have a match query, we'll have an unwind query, we'll have a grouping. So I'm calling them queries, but they're actually stages. So we'll have a match stage, unwind stage, and grouping stage. So you'll have an unwind stage and you'll have a grouping stage. And filter match, you say bson.t. T will have a $match. Now a couple of more things need to happen out here, obviously. What do you want to match? You want to say value is bson.d. Spelling mistake out here. bson.d and primitive.e. You want to have key. Key is underscore ID. Comma value is user t underscore ID. Okay. So this is your match query. And for unwind query, unwind basically helps you unwind data and helps you basically unwind, but like, why would you unwind the data, right? So let me first explain to you that. So firstly, you'll match, right? You'll match that, and then you'll find everything for that user. Now that user has a user cart, right? The user has something called as a user cart. And user cart is something that you want to work with because you want to find the total of whatever things are there in the user cart. So you want to unwind it, right? Unwind basically helps you to unwind the data. Like, it's very simple. It unwinds the data and also helps you to work with that data, what's there inside. So bson.d, and then you have key, you have $unwind. So with the help of unwinding, you can access the internal values of that array that MongoDB gives you from this stage. So the processing happens stage by stage. From the first stage, get some data, and the data is existing as an array, for example. Now you want to unwind that data in that array so that you can run operations on it. So bson.d is primitive.key. Okay, key here will be path, and value here will be $user cart. Okay. This means that the data that you just found in this first stage, which is the match stage, for that data, for that user, you have a variable called user cart that we just want to unwind for now. Okay. Now is the grouping stage. Grouping stage is where you want to find the addition of all the values in the cart. How do you do that? You say bson.d and you want to say key is $group. $group is the key. And what's the values? The values will be here. json.d primitive.key. Okay, here you want to put something here. You want to put, well, the key is ID, but the value is $ID. $_ID. Okay. Now you want to be careful about these brackets, as in how many brackets at the end, how many brackets in between, right? So just after this bracket, this particular bracket with primitive.e, right, just after this bracket, you want to have the other bracket. Like you want to put a comma just after this bracket, and then you want to have the part with the finding the total amount, total of all the amounts of all the values in the cart. Okay, to write that, you want to create a pair of curly braces like this. You want to say key total, comma, value is json.d. Then you say primitive. Again, just if your auto what do you call it, complete is giving you something, autocomplete is giving you something, take it up and then just change it. So you want to find the $sum. So $sum is not a stage, it is a aggregation function. Okay, so there are stages are only these, like there's match, unwind, and group, and there are multiple functions that you can run in that stage. So here we're just running a sum function to find the sum of. Now, like I told you, there are these stages, right? So for the first stage, you get the data of the user. Second stage, you get user card, but you're unwinding it in the second stage. This third stage, now you can start working with the values in the user card. So we'll take that user card. We'll say $user card, and we want access to the price, and we want to take the sum of the sum of all the prices of the user card, and we want to store that in a key called total. So at the end, what you get is total, and that's the key. And here, in case you don't understand this basically means that with the help of ID, so the ID is going to be used as the key here. So that's what $ID is. Okay, now is the time to run the aggregation function. So the way you run an aggregation function is quite straightforward. You say user collection, just like you run any other MongoDB command, as in you work with the database. Just like that, you also work with aggregation. So you say ctx, mongo.pipeline. And the pipeline, what do you want to pass? You want to pass in the curly braces. Please make sure you're in the curly braces. You say filter underscore match. Is this first value out here? Filter underscore match, comma. You want to pass unwind. You want to pass grouping. So all these three things you want to pass here. Amazing. So everything is looking pretty amazing. The only one thing that we have not done is whatever comes back from this function, you want to capture that in a variable called point cursor. Okay. Now this error that you just got out here, you want to handle that error. So you want to say error is not equal to nil. What do you want to do then? You want to print out the error. Okay. So for now, let's just create a variable called listing, and it's a slice of type json.m. Then you say point cursor, which is this point cursor.all. You want to go over all the values. You'll say point cursor.all ctx, type of listing. My autocomplete has put these curly braces here. They don't need to be here. And this is actually point cursor, not curson. So you'll say if error is equal to point cursor.all ctx, listing. Gonna handle the error. If error is not equal to nil, you'll say log.println error. Now, see, whatever you've received out here, right? You can't just directly return whatever you're getting from MongoDB to the user. He's not going to understand anything. So that's why you have to do this kind of a step to basically make that data into some sensible data. All right. So you'll say c dot abort status, http dot status internal server error. Now you want to range over that data for some JSON. So you'll say for JSON is equal to range listing. So you want to range over the listings that you just got. And you want to say c dot indented JSON. Say 200 comma JSON total. So I told you that at the end of this, all these stages in the aggregation query, what you're going to get access to is the total, which is basically the sum total of all the items present in the user's cart, sum of the prices of all the items present in the user cart. And that's what you're returning from here. C dot indented JSON, you'll have 200 comma filled cart dot user cart. After this bracket, you want to say ctx dot done. Phew, this was quite a long function. We're doing quite a few things. Let me just go over them again. So you get access to the ID, which is the user ID in the request. That's what you get access to from the context, which is C. You want to check if that ID is null by mistake, or an empty string by mistake. You want to say that, hey, it's an invalid ID, it doesn't exist, blah, 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 all right? And then you want to get the object ID from hex, and you want to store that in a variable, which looks like user ID, but it's not user ID because you don't want to, again, use that variable. You want to have a new variable, okay? User TID, we'll call it. And this is a common pattern you'll find, so that us developers, we don't want to forget what that variable has, and we don't want to make a very long variable. We'll just put a new letter here, and while it might look like a typo to many people, but the keen-eyed developer would know that, okay, this is why this guy has done it. You'll find it in many people's code on GitHub. Might be something new to you if you're new to programming, but like I've seen this very often. Anyhow, so then you'll have your timeout, which is basically 100 seconds, and then you'll have your variable called filled cart. Filled cart is basically this user. Okay. Now what you want to do is you want to create the aggregation query. The aggregation query has a match, has an unwind, has group. These are the three most common stages in an aggregation function. If you don't know what aggregation is, I told you, just go to Google, search MongoDB aggregation, you'll be able to understand really well these three main stages. But I'll anyways tell you what these stages do. Match stage basically finds that particular user, and find that user ID and all the data for that user ID. The unwind stage is basically going to unwind this data, which is user card data, from a closed array into something that's processable by us, and then processable by the next stage at least. So the next stage is grouping stage. The grouping stage, what you want to do is you want to group all the values there with the help of ID, and you'll find the total. So, and at the end, the aggregation query is just finding the total of all the prices of the items that exist in the users and that particular user's cart. Okay. Then you run this aggregation function. Then you take a variable called listing. It's a slice of bsum.m, and then you want to go over all of the values that you just got here, point cursor, and then you want to convert that into listing. And then you want to range over those listings with the help of the JSON, and in JSON you'll get access to total. If you don't do this last stage, right, all these stages, if you don't do all this, then you're going to have data that doesn't make any sense to the user or to Golang. So that's why you have to work like this. And now the data that you get, that you send back to the user, is proper JSON data, which is in total. The total data is what you're sending, the total of the all the items, and also you're sending the user cart. So this is what your get item from cart function does. It's quite a long video, right, for just one function, but I wanted to explain everything to you properly because just like that, I just felt like doing something good today. Just wanted to explain how this whole thing works. No, the reason for that is basically because this is actually the most important function in all the other functions. Everything else was pretty straightforward, easy, blah, blah, blah. This one is a little important. I thought people might get confused. So I thought I'd just spend more time on it and explain to you properly. Anyhow, thanks a lot for watching. Do subscribe to this channel because you get awesome value and content out here. I am building you guys up to a place where we'll have a huge project which will have microservices, and there will be multiple different microservices of multiple different languages. So that there will be a Rust microservice, Python microservice, Golang microservice, all running in the same project, all working together using gRPC. That's where I want to take you guys to, because that's how I build my own projects. And I want to get you guys there to that stage, but I'll have to teach you Python, Rust, and Golang the way that I want you to know about Python, Rust, and Golang. So that's why I'm teaching you Golang. But I also have some projects coming up on Python and Rust. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.